everyone. With the initial euphoria around the cancellation of boards having settled, now it's time for a reality check for most students as the results are expected soon. The next big thing on every student and parent's mind is college admissions. There are concerns about cutoffs, admission tests, and much more. There is still a lot of uncertainty about the admission process that each college would be following. I'm Pooja Sethi, and in this series on Mission College Admission, we would be talking to heads of various universities to find answers to your questions. Our first guest on the series is Mr. Aditya Berlia, renowned educationist, entrepreneur, author, and co-promoter and pro-chancellor of APJ Stia University. Mr. Berlia has donned many roles. After completing an honors in science from Stanford and MBA from Harvard Business School, he has also been the former chairman of CII Delhi, apart from being a member of Delhi Higher Education Committee. Welcome to the show, Mr. Berlia. So while we're going to be discussing college admissions today, let's begin by knowing your secret to success. How did you get into Stanford, which has a less than 4% acceptance rate?
So, Pooja, for me as an international student, Stanford takes about 3 students from India every year, 3 to 5. I think, honestly, I just say it's pure luck. I can see there are so many people who worked harder than me, who were smarter than me. I was very fortunate to have a great guru who was my grandfather, as well as my mother, who from a very young age focused on a lot of hard work, academics, philosophy. And so I had the pleasure of having all of that help and support with me as well. But to be very honest, I'm just so grateful to the universe and so grateful to God, because I think beyond anything, when there's just so many people applying and so many well-qualified candidates, luck has a very large role to play in these things.
And now for most students who rely on their class 12 scores for merit-based admissions, the biggest anxiety today is how will the universities take admissions in 2021?
So we have a very different philosophy, and this is, I believe, the philosophy that should be there in every university around the world. Certainly, the best universities around the world do use the same thing. We'll try to look at a 360 degree approach to every candidate who applies. One is demonstrated academic excellence. If you're smart, if you're hardworking, if you love academics, it'll show up. Now, whether it shows up in a class 11th result or class 12th result, whether it shows up in a SAT, whether it shows up in another entrance exam, we know from experience that an exam is merely an event in time. It's not a measure of who you are and what your academic ability is. So we want to see that you have an academic bent, that you love academics, and that you're able to keep up with a very rigorous curriculum. At the same time, we also truly want and respect people who have done something. People who have may at the cost of a few percentage points in their academic career have done social work, who have maybe taken leadership roles in their school, who formed clubs, societies, maybe done a little bit of entrepreneurship on the side. And the third, we really look at leadership and determination. What you want to do, is this person determined to make something of themselves? How is their moral character? I think these 3-4 things, when we combine and we try to elicit that by interviews, we elicit that through the counseling process. We ask people to submit essays and recommendations. That 360 view being established of a student allows us to take a call. And I think it's much more fair and reasonable to a student than to just tell them, one exam and that's it, and their entire college
depends on that.
Exactly.
I think that's a great approach, not just relying on one exams. So which is, I think, what most universities internationally are also following.
I think most good universities internationally, but Pooja, I want to take a step back and explain, why don't all universities in India follow this, right? And I think it's important for students to know that it's not because because the educators, the universities, the regulators don't want to do this. This is a tried and tested a system that has been in space for years and years. The problem, what happens is, that you have uh, the need, particularly for public universities and those colleges who are affiliated to those universities, to make sure that there is an auditable perception of fairness. And what I mean by auditable perception of fairness, the downside of our methodology, there's a lot of discretion, right? How do you judge between someone who's got maybe 85, 89%, someone who's got 92%, 93%? One has maybe become the head boy of their school, one may have been a sports captain or done something brilliant, right? How do you assign points? Now, we have an internal system that does that. But for the public, it's very hard to explain to them. And so, if a public university were to use this criteria, you would have lawsuits, you would have courts, it would not be accepted. So it's
For
far
private
easier.
universities, it is much easier, I think, to have
It
their
is
own
much
system.
easier, and because public universities have to show to the public how they have given admissions. And so what ends up them just saying, hey, here's an exam and here's the cutoff. And we are not going to look at anything else, because in the perception of the public, this is a fair system. But as you and I know, it's not. It's horrible, right? And one of the things which I'm really glad is the new NEP coming in, which is trying to change this.
By when is this new regulation expected to be implemented
Well,
about the universities?
that's a great question. It should have been done by now. It was a very aggressive timetable. I think the NEP was hoping 2022, 2023 would be the year. COVID had a little bit, of course, paused and delayed that. I think the central government and the state governments will have to pass a whole bunch of laws, and including establishing the new regulatory commissions. We are almost at the anniversary of the NEP's passing, but I'm confident that in the next 6 months, at least the legal framework will be start to build. I would say maybe a year after that is where we will see these dramatic changes starting to slowly percolate through the system. But I think the NEP has an aggressive timetable. It's not a vision 2050 or a vision 2040. I think they want to try to implement this within the next 3 to 5 years.
That will be great for all the students. So let's
Absolutely.
hope this happens sooner. And coming to my next question, what will be the changes in pedagogy in the post-COVID times?
Well, that's a fantastic question. So I think, and this is what I say to everybody, the biggest thing that COVID has left with us is that we've tried this worldwide experiment, right? Where everybody went virtual, and that's done a couple of very nice things. First, there's the amount of confidence that professors and teachers have got. Right. Earlier, if you told them, please teach an online course, they might need an assistant, maybe an IT person, a proper system. Now they have a phone and they're off. Right. So we've effectively trained a cadre of faculty members, teachers, school teachers, professors all across the world to be able to teach online. I think that was a one brilliant thing. And more importantly, given them the confidence that they can do it. And that will lead to some beautiful outcomes. The second thing is it showed us the limitations of what can and cannot be done on a virtual platform. I used to get very scared, 3 to 5 years ago. People would say, oh, everything is going to be virtual. Virtual is the answer to everything. It's a panacea of all problems. And we all knew that was never the case. There was always going to be a blended model. There's always going to be some things that are better taught virtually, some things that are required to be taught in the physical realm.
Classroom environment, yes.
And so now we've hit at the limits. We've been doing dance classes, dramas, we've had annual days, all of this stuff we have done virtually. Stuff works, but a lot of it doesn't. And so I think we've discovered the limitation, and that really will inform how curriculums change. And the third most important is regulators have learned. They've seen it in action. They've also gained confidence that yes, this is not correspondence course or distance education the way it used to be, and that used to be always stuck in their mind, that virtual learning is basically a distance course. But because everybody has now moved to virtual learning, even the NEP came out, if you know, right, in 6 months after COVID, right? So they were able to put in a lot of thought into saying that, look, we need to recognize that blended and virtual learning is a valid form of learning on par with being there in a physical classroom. And I think those three key elements would I think dramatically change where we will see in a year from now on how people think about curriculum, more importantly, think about how they wish to access education.
I think with 14 months, people have been now education institutions have been closed, and there have been a lot of learnings, and of course, it's changed
Absolutely.
the way the classroom learning happens. And also, will there be any change in the admission process this year?
So I think it has to. Obviously, you have a mishmash. A certain state board exams went on, but they went on in a very abridged manner. A lot of students couldn't make it. There was no classroom teaching that's happening. For the vast majority of schools in India, particularly the government-run schools, at this point, they have just been unable to do any coursework at home. So it wouldn't be very fair to sort of use any exam results, particularly since students haven't had the opportunity to even enter a classroom. I think you're going to have individual universities and colleges figure out hybrid models where they're going to look at different assessment parameters. They're going to try, unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately, to pick one criteria, right? And this is, we'll take your class 11th or 12th marks, etc. I think that would be the wrong aspect. I think if they could find a blended model that, best out of three options, either best out of what you've done in class 12th, if you've given an exam, best out of, 2 years of history that you have aggregate score, or an entrance exam which they trust, and then try to find a way to equivalate them and then give. That would be a reasonable way to do it. But I'm it's just so sad. Our education system, just as we have the opportunity to change, gives its final reveal of how broken it is in terms of measuring students.
Let's hope most universities, take a cue from what you're saying and they follow this model. And also, with the CBSE cancelling the boards and the state boards still went ahead, some of the state boards, they conducted their exams. So people don't know now. They feel one side is going to score more and the other side is going to score less. And if this will impact the percentages, the criteria of admissions getting tougher for students.
I don't think so. I think all educators want to do what is in the best interests of students. I fundamentally believe that all the government wants to do is in the best interests of students. They have to balance. And I think CBSE not giving the exam is actually a boon, because it teaches everybody that you don't need a CBSE board exam to get into university. I think, and I hope that this inspires and allows universities going on next year to come up with a more flexible criteria of admission. And certainly, I think even if you look at the state boards which have gone ahead, a large number of students weren't able to attend because the infrastructure, there were lockdowns, open, close, all of this. So I do think most educators and regulators are fully cognizant of it. They're trying to make the best of a very terrible situation. But I don't think students should be worried. I think there are plenty of fantastic, good colleges and opportunities out there. I think there will be uncertainty, and I have full sympathy and empathy for everybody out there who's going through this crisis. But don't worry. People are there for you. They are thinking about you, and they truly want what's best for you. So they will try to come to a system, a decision that works in your favor as much as they can.
I think this is going to be very, very heartening for students to hear this. And let's really hope, for the sake of students and their parents, that everybody gets into the colleges of their choice. So when do you think the academic session for the undergraduate students will begin this year?
This is a great question. So traditionally, each college has a few days here and there, but principally by 1st September is where most colleges and universities start off. That is still our aim, to try to meet that deadline. We're just about reaching in July. We have a strong pipeline of admissions. A lot of students really respect what we are doing in terms of our university, and how we've sort of handled online and offline teaching. I certainly think that there will be a blended mode of education, at least till the end of the year. But I'm confident that the government is now on full swing with the vaccination drive, and vaccines genuinely work, particularly for the 18 plus population. I think by the end of the year, we should see most colleges and universities fully open. So at worst, you might have a 2 to 3 year blended offline online mode, but I think we should come back to normalcy starting Jan 1st.
So in case this blended model continues, would you still be opening the college hostels for admissions?
We would absolutely do so. I think for us is to try to find the best way for students to have a very interactive and thriving campus life. Part of it is being in hostels. but we also are very cognizant of the risks involved. At the end of the day, the safety and security of our students is our number one priority. And although we will open the hostels for admission, we certainly won't be charging fees until they can be occupied.
Would you also be introducing any new courses in the university this year?
There is a whole bunch of new courses. If I start going on, it'll be a huge number. I'll tell you a general philosophy. What we have in our university documents, we have something called mark to market. And mark to market means that essentially every faculty member, every teacher has the right to change their course every 2 to 3 months to bring in what's happening around in the market. So our existing courses have also been completely changed. A huge new amount of curriculum has come in, as well as we have a number of new courses which are going to be launched this year as well. And that's all part of making sure that we are able to offer all our students a very comprehensive pathway. Our university is a little bit unique. We follow international best practices, which now the NEP has sort of enshrined. We have a credit-based system. We've had it since start. Students can change their majors. They can take minors. And so what's very interesting is that even if you come in for one degree, if after 1 year you change your mind, that's perfectly fine. You can pursue something else. And so that flexibility framework allows us to launch a lot many more courses, but as well also change the existing curriculum to ensure that students are getting the best of what's actually out there. And our goal is always to be ahead of the market by 3 to 4 years, because by the time you graduate, that compression happens.
Anything you would like to share with the students who are applying for admissions this year?
Absolutely. So the one big thing, there are two extremes. One is that, I have to become, the classic lawyer, doctor, engineer, etc., because that's what parents or society tells me, but you have no aptitude for it. On one hand, you have follow your passion, but you have no aptitude for your passion. I want to tell students, find the middle ground. Find something that you can make a career from, that is something that you have an aptitude for, and that you will find success at. Your passion can become your hobby. And if you're lucky, you'll convert your hobby into a profession, into a career. It's 2021. In 2021, you can go online and take a bunch of different courses over 10 days to even see whether you like a course. You can see the curriculum. So don't just make a decision based on, oh, so-and-so told me, or I think this, or I read a newspaper article. Actually go online, find different courses, try your hand at it, take 5-10 hours of course material, lectures, see if this is something you actually enjoy, see it's something that you have an aptitude for, and then make a choice. Just going for the very standard cookie cutter careers, cookie cutter degrees isn't really going to help you thrive. And so that's my big advice. Don't go
And
both ways.
I think it's a very, very valuable and practical tip. And I genuinely feel all students must try this, not blindly follow their hobbies and think they are your passions. And so you would do well in them. I think this would really help a lot of students. So thank you so much, Mr. Burlia, for talking to us. And let's hope a lot of doubts of the students concerning admissions would have been cleared today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Pooja. It's always a pleasure being here.